Hi everyone, and welcome to Area of Study 3, and this is where we look at one of our management functions more specifically, and it's operations management, and this outcome is worth 40 marks. So what is it? Essentially it's the design and operation of a particular system that creates the good or produces the service. So that's essentially what operations is. It's the actual making of products or producing of services. And all the processes come together to create a final output, which is the final product. So here's an example of just making hamburgers, some basic information. So let's say that you're making hamburgers and you need to decide what the best products to make those hamburgers are. So where are you going to get the buns from? What lettuce are you going to use? Same with the tomatoes, and probably most importantly the actual meat that you're going to use in the hamburger. You then need to look at what kind of staff and how many staff are needed to actually create the hamburger and then serve it, so you need to organise that. And then where the best place to actually make the hamburger is, what your facilities are like, where it's going to be located, etc. Now there's lots of other things that are involved. We also need things like how we're actually going to make the burger, what equipment is required. But for now, all I want you to know is, I want you to be clear on, is that operations is about creating a product or creating a service. So that's really important. That's all you need to know at this stage. Now operations, how is it linked to objectives? It's important. It's actually essentially the engine room, so it's one of the most important parts. Without it, there is no product or there is no service, so you have nothing to sell as an organisation. So organisations are always trying to efficiently create a product, and operations is the strategy that's used in order to do that. So that's really important. So we will talk a lot about productivity, and we may have already, but especially now in operations, we look at how do we do it more efficiently and still be effective by creating the product or service that we desire. And we're going to look at that later in the future. Now, before we move on, we need to understand that there's a difference between the operations in a manufacturing organisation and the operations in a service organisation. So it's important. Often it's a common mistake that students look at manufacturing all the time because that's what they're used to, but we need to look at service also. So we'll talk about both throughout these videos. So these are some of the key differences we're going to go through 3 key differences between a manufacturing organisation and a service organisation when it comes to operations. So the first one, manufacturing, it transforms its inputs into tangible outputs. Now, the term inputs and outputs, we'll get into that a bit later on, but inputs essentially is all the products used to make the product, so all the resources used to make the product, and the output is the final product. So you've got the iMac there, and obviously tangible means that you can touch it. So when you go and buy it, you can actually carry it in your hands and use it. Whereas a service, it's an intangible output. So we've got here at a doctor's office, when you walk out of the doctor's office, there's nothing to touch. I mean, fair enough, they may give you some pills and some medication that you can carry, but essentially you're walking out of there hopefully with improved health, and that's the service that they provide. So they try and get you better. That is intangible. So that's one of the key differences. Manufacturing is tangible and services are intangible. Another key difference is that manufacturing products can be stored and services cannot be stored. So here, this is just a small clip of, I think it's IKEA's warehouse. Now, they've got their full warehouse. If they don't sell all those products in one day, and it would be amazing if they did, because then they'd be out of stock, but they can store them for future so that they're always in stock. So they can be stored. That's important. Whereas a service, here we've got an airline or an aeroplane with lots of empty seats. Now those seats cannot be stored. So once that plane takes off, those seats are empty. They can't be sold tomorrow. Not for that particular flight. For another flight, yeah, fair enough. But once that plane takes off, that's lost revenue for that organisation. That plane, so those seats cannot be stored and sold at a later date. So services cannot be stored, products can be. The final difference that we'll go through is that there's very little customer involvement in production. So with a manufacturing and the making of the iMac there, the customer doesn't have to be present. Whereas in a service, if you're going to get a haircut, you can't stay at home and call the hairdresser and say, right, I'll just have the short back and sides, because you need to be present. So the customer for a service, and not always, but often for service organisations, the customer needs to be present when it's being delivered. So just to recap, these are the three key differences between manufacturing and services. Manufacturing transforms inputs into tangible outputs, products can be stored, and there's very little customer involvement in the production, whereas service is a little bit opposite, where inputs are intangible, services can't be stored, and customer normally needs to be present when the service is being delivered. On the next video, we're going to look at the actual operations system. So I'll see you on the next video. And just remember, for more videos, activities, and practice questions, be sure to go to teachingbubble.com.